This legal technicality might prevent you from being able to return a defective product to a store for a refund. But, lucky for you, I'm a barrister who helps you understand law, so you're never going to get caught out by this again. So with the holiday season very quickly rushing past us, you might end up with lots of gifts that actually might be defective. Now, whether you're the person that's bought it or whether you're the person that's received it, there's a couple of little tricks and technicalities that some retailers might use to prevent you from returning it to the store. Now, whilst most retailers these days are quite good at accepting returns, some of them might try to avoid giving you a refund or might force upon you a credit note to spend in store in certain situations, and I'm going to explain those now so you don't get caught out. The biggest one that pops up at this time of year is when gifts are exchanged, because as the gift recipient, you have no legal rights, believe it or not, to enforce any consumer rights in store to return the product for a refund. Now, if the product is dangerous, you will still be protected by the Consumer Protection Act, which is where the product is defective and dangerous that it causes injury or damage to you or property. But that I can cover in another video. But for exercising your consumer rights, they can only be exercised by the person who contracted to purchase the product in the first place. This is one reason that some helpful stores issue you with a gift receipt, meaning that the recipient can bring it back to the store to exchange it for something else. However, how about the scenario where you don't want anything else in store and the person that's buying the gift simply wants you to be able to return it and get a refund for the full value of the product? Well, as I said, those rights to return and reject can only be exercised by the person that bought the thing in the first place, and they can only be exercised within the first 30 days. That's called the short-term right to reject. If it is defective or in any other way not complying with the rights within the Consumer Rights Act, which is that it's satisfactory quality, it's fit for purpose, if it's brand new, it's free from defects and all of these kind of things, those rights can only be enforced by the person that paid for it. So hopefully, if you've got a close enough relationship with the person that bought this thing in the first place, you can ask them to exercise those rights, come along with you to exact a refund from the store instead of forcing upon you a credit note. Most stores will offer you a credit note as a quick and easy way for you to return it, but keep you spending the money in store. But this raises yet another question. Can the store force you to accept a credit note? Well, as the usual legal saying goes, it depends, but it only depends on a few things. The only reason they can force you to accept a credit note is where they have discretion as to whether you get any refund or not. And that only really comes into play when you are outside of the first 30 days rejection period from buying the product in the first place, or you're only returning it because you've changed your mind. You don't like the colour, it's too big, too small, or otherwise you just don't like it. In that situation, there is no absolute right to return something just because you don't like it, it's too big, too small, wrong colour, or any of those kind of things. Whereas if it's defective, there's a pull in the clothing or a tear in the clothing, it's coming apart at the seams or something like that, then you do have the right to reject it. But as I said, that can only be exercised by the person that paid for it. This throws up yet another question. Let's say you do have the person that paid for it coming back to the store with you, but they don't have the original receipt, because many people just don't keep the receipts for these things. They buy it, they gift it, and they've thrown the receipt away. This, however, also doesn't mean that the store can force a credit note upon you. The law does not require that you have the original receipt for purchase with you in order to uphold your consumer rights. In fact, the law doesn't stipulate any specific proof at all for you to exercise your consumer rights. All it says is that if you exercise those rights, the store must give you a refund, and you must make the thing available. But of course, practically every store is not going to give you that refund unless you have the receipt. However, you could make the argument if you've got a banking app on your phone and you can prove that you made that purchase in store, that ought to be enough. And if the case ultimately, for whatever reason, ended up in court, even if it was only for £50 or so, if ultimately you ended up in court and then they ultimately admitted that the proof on your phone would have been enough to prove that you bought it, the court is going to take rather a dim view on the retailer for allowing this to go all the way to court before they gave you a refund. So then how about these extended return periods where the retailer says you can return it anytime up to whenever in January or however long it might be? Well, you'll sometimes see the phrase, "This is in addition to your statutory rights." That simply means that this is something offered by the store as a choice of theirs on top of what your statutory rights already apply. which in this case includes the 30-day right to reject. So if it is a fairly expensive gift, you ought to make sure that you take the person that paid for it back to the store with you to reject it within the first 30 days. Because if you're outside of that first 30 days, the best you can really hope for is a repair or replacement. Or, as is often the case, an argument with the retailer that it wasn't defective in the first place. The next questions that will naturally pop up are those about sales. What if you buy something in a sale? What rights do you have in that situation? Well, the same rights apply under the Consumer Rights Act to anything bought in a sale as they do any other ordinary purchase, save for a narrow exception. The exception being is that if there is a known defect in the product in the sale, i.e. it's been returned or it's got a stain or it's got a pull or anything else of that nature, if that's brought to your attention before you pay for it, and it must be brought to your attention before you pay for it, not just assumed that it's there because it's in the sale. They must bring this defect to your attention before you pay for it. Then, of course, you can't return it because of the defect. Then that defect alone doesn't give you the right to reject it within the first 30 days as it would ordinarily do so. However, if there is another defect besides the original defect that occurs or you find within the first 30 days, again, you still have that initial 30 days right to reject that product as you would as if you paid full price. Very often, in fact, stores will say that this was a sale item, so all they can do is give you a credit note. Or the worst example I've heard yet is this was a sale item, so they can only give you the price that it is now, i.e. it's been reduced to £2 from 35 or whatever it might be. But remember that the only time you don't have a right to return it is if you've simply changed your mind, or if there was a known defect and they've told you about that defect, you obviously don't have the right to return it because of that defect. But in any other situation, you do have the right to return it and for a full refund. They can't simply say this is now in sale, so you only get the sale price on the refund. If it was defective and you are enforcing your consumer rights, you are entitled to a full refund of the full price of the product before it went into sale. It is actually illegal for the shop to tell you that you are not entitled to a full refund just because the item is now in sale. If you paid full price and the product was defective or not of satisfactory quality for any of those reasons, you have that right to reject it within the first 30 days and they must give you a full refund. But remember, that can only be exercised by the person who paid for it, not the gift recipient. So as awkward as a conversation that might be, you probably need to have a conversation with the person that paid for it and say, I'm terribly sorry, but would you mind coming with me as the person that paid for this thing so that you can exercise your rights under the Consumer Rights Act for a full refund for this product? Because it's not fair that somebody will pay for something that is defective and the shop gets away with it just because you are not the one that paid for it. So I hope that's useful. I'm sure there's lots more questions. Please do drop them in the comments box below. I will endeavor to get back to those in future videos. Please do remember to like this video and subscribe so that my channel will keep growing. I'm eternally grateful and thank you for watching.